Let me ask you something before we even get started. Have you ever watched someone talented, someone magnetic, someone that the whole world seemed to be cheering for, just fall apart? Not in slow motion, not with warning, but in the most public, most brutal, most devastating way imaginable? Because what happened to Blake Lively inside that courtroom wasn't just a legal setback. It wasn't just paperwork. It wasn't just lawyers and judges and motions being filed. What happened was a complete and total collapse of a career that was carefully built over 2 decades, of a public image that millions of people believed in, of a woman who, just months ago, seemed completely untouchable. And the worst part, she saw it coming. She knew it was coming, and she still couldn't stop it. So today, we're breaking down everything. The full story. The courtroom moment that left the internet absolutely stunned. The breakdown that nobody who was present in that room will ever forget. The tears, the silence, and the question that every single person watching this video is already asking themselves. Is this truly the end for Blake Lively? Stay with me, because this story goes so much deeper than the headlines. Music shifts, softer now, nostalgic undertone. To understand what happened in that courtroom, you have to go back. Way back. Because this didn't start with a lawsuit. This didn't start with a falling out or a social media feud or a PR disaster. This started with who Blake Lively was, and more importantly, who the world thought she was. Blake Lively burst onto the scene in a way that felt almost unfair. She had everything. The looks, the charm, the confidence that most people spend their entire lives trying to manufacture. When Gossip Girl launched, she became Serena van der Woodsen. Not just played her, became her. That character was aspirational in a way that defined an entire generation. She was the girl that every teenage girl wanted to be, and every Hollywood executive wanted to cast. And she played it perfectly. Off-screen, Blake cultivated something even more powerful than fame. She cultivated likability. She was the rare celebrity who felt real. The girl who made jokes about her husband Ryan Reynolds with the kind of ease that made you feel like you were sitting in her kitchen. She wasn't just famous, she was relatable. And in the world of modern celebrity, relatability is currency. It's armor. It's everything. Her brand grew into something massive. Fashion collaborations. A lifestyle empire. A marriage that the internet collectively decided was #goals before that word even existed. Blake and Ryan were the couple. The funny couple. The gorgeous couple. The couple you genuinely rooted for because they made it look fun. And for years, that image held. But here's the thing about armor, right? Armor can look perfect from the outside and still be cracking underneath. And if you were paying close attention, if you were watching carefully, the cracks started showing long before the courtroom, long before the lawsuit, long before everything that's about to unfold in this video. Music begins to darken, tension building underneath the narration. It started with, it ends with us. Now, if you followed this story at all, you know that the movie itself was supposed to be a triumph. A passion project. An emotional, deeply personal adaptation of Colleen Hoover's best-selling novel about domestic abuse, survival, and the complicated mess of loving someone who hurts you. The subject matter alone demanded a certain kind of gravity, a certain kind of respect, and initially, the trailers looked incredible. The buzz was real. Fans of the book, and there are millions of them, were cautiously optimistic. They wanted this story told right. They needed it told right. But then, something shifted. The promotional campaign started to feel off. There's really no other way to describe it. Blake's approach to promoting the film, the pink outfits, the cocktail-forward interviews, the flower-themed press appearances, started to clash in a very uncomfortable way with the actual weight of the story being told. People began whispering, then commenting, then screaming about it on social media. Why does this feel like she's promoting a rom-com? Is anyone going to talk about the disconnect here? The book is about surviving abuse, and she's out here doing cupcake decorating content. I'm confused. Now, to be fair, marketing decisions aren't always made by the actors themselves. There are studios, PR teams, brand deals, carefully constructed rollout strategies that have nothing to do with the lead actress. But Blake's fingerprints were everywhere on this campaign. She was vocal about her involvement, vocal about her vision, vocal about her ownership of the project. Which meant when the backlash came, and it came, there was nowhere to hide. And that backlash? That was just the opening act. Because while the public was debating the marketing choices, something else was happening behind closed doors. Something that the entertainment industry insiders were watching very, very carefully. something that would eventually become the foundation for a legal battle that would shake Hollywood to its core. Justin Baldoni, Blake's co-star and the director of It Ends With Us, was not happy. And when someone like Justin Baldoni is not happy, and when the project in question has the kind of cultural footprint this film had, things don't stay quiet for long. Details started leaking. Anonymous sources started talking. And the narrative that began to form was not the triumphant story of a passion project brought to life. It was something murkier, more complicated, and frankly more dramatic than anything that ended up on screen. There were reports of creative disagreements, reports of tension on set, reports of conflicts over the direction of the film, the handling of its sensitive subject matter, and the question of whose vision ultimately owned the story. And then came the legal filings. And when those filings became public, when the actual documented allegations started circulating, the internet didn't just react. It exploded. One fan commented simply, "I genuinely cannot believe what I'm reading right now." Another wrote, "I've been a Blake Lively fan since I was 14 years old. This is devastating." And someone else, someone whose comment got over 40,000 likes, wrote something that a lot of people were thinking, but nobody wanted to say out loud. She built her whole brand on being the good one. And now I don't know what to believe. That right there, that comment, that's where this story really begins. Because Blake Lively walked into that courtroom, not just as a defendant in a legal dispute. She walked in carrying the weight of a brand that had been fracturing for months. Carrying the weight of millions of fans who were waiting, genuinely waiting, to see if she was going to come out of this the way she always had. Composed, charming, untouchable. But something happened in that courtroom. Something that nobody, not her legal team, not her PR team, not the fans who drove hours just to be outside the building, was fully prepared for. Blake Lively broke down. And in that single human devastating moment, everything changed. But before we get to that moment, because we will get there, I promise you that you need to understand the legal battlefield she was walking into. Because it wasn't just about one lawsuit. It wasn't just about one director and one movie and one bad press cycle. This was years of tension, carefully documented allegations, counter-allegations, and a legal team on the other side that had been preparing for months. This was a courtroom battle that the entertainment press had been calling the most explosive Hollywood legal moment since Johnny Depp and Amber Heard sat across from each other, and the whole world pressed pause. And just like that case, just like it, the real story wasn't just about who was right or wrong. It was about what happened to two people in an industry that chews people up when the cameras finally stopped rolling and the truth had nowhere left to hide. So let me ask you again, have you ever watched someone fall apart? Because we're just getting started, and I need you to stay with me. Because part 2 is where the fans turned, the leaks started flying, and the tension inside and outside that courtroom reached a breaking point that nobody saw coming. Don't go anywhere. You know that feeling when you're watching something unfold in real time, and you just know in your gut, that this is one of those moments that people are going to be talking about for years? That's exactly what happened the moment those court documents hit the internet. It wasn't a slow burn. It wasn't a gradual realization. It was instantaneous. Like someone dropped a lit match into a room that had been filling with gas for months. And within hours, not days, not weeks, hours, the entire entertainment conversation shifted. Every podcast, every YouTube channel, every comment section, every group chat that had anything to do with celebrity culture was suddenly talking about one thing and one thing only. Blake Lively. And not in the way she was used to being talked about. Let's set the scene for you, because context here is everything. The legal filings that became public painted a picture that felt almost impossible to reconcile with the Blake Lively the world thought it knew. The allegations were detailed. They were specific. And they were documented in a way that made it very difficult for even the most devoted fans to simply wave them away as industry gossip or a he-said-she-said situation that would quietly disappear after a few news cycles. Justin Baldoni's legal team had come prepared. And what they presented wasn't just a counter-narrative to Blake's version of events. It was a full, methodically constructed case that pointed to a pattern of behavior on set, a pattern of influence over the film's final cut, a pattern of what the filings described as a coordinated effort to reshape the public perception of the conflict before it ever reached a courtroom. Now, Blake's team pushed back. Hard. And they had their own documentation, their own witnesses, their own timeline of events that told a very different story. This wasn't a one-sided situation. Both sides came with ammunition. Both sides came with receipts. But here's what nobody could have predicted. Here's what changed everything. It was what happened between the two legal narratives that set the internet on absolute fire. It was the text messages. When excerpts of private communications began circulating. And look, in high-profile legal cases like this, certain materials inevitably find their way into the public conversation, whether through official filings, leaks, or sourced reporting. The reaction was seismic. Because these weren't vague, interpretable exchanges. These were messages that, depending on which side you believed, either confirmed a deliberate smear campaign or exposed a toxic working environment that had been festering since day one of production. One excerpt in particular, shared widely across social media before any official verification, allegedly showed communications about managing press narratives in real time, about which journalists to contact, about how to frame the story before the story broke, about controlling the damage before the damage was even officially acknowledged. And the internet did not handle this quietly. Twitter, or X, whatever we're calling it this week, became a courtroom of its own. Reddit threads stretching thousands of comments deep. TikTok creators dropping reaction videos every single hour. YouTube channels like this one, scrambling to piece together timelines, cross-reference statements, and make sense of a situation that was moving faster than anyone could keep up with. One creator with over 2 million subscribers posted a 40-minute breakdown that got 4 million views in under 24 hours. 4 million views. 24 hours. That's not just viral. That's cultural earthquake territory. And the fans, they split. Immediately. Team Blake formed fast. These were the loyalists. The ones who had grown up watching Gossip Girl, who had followed her career through every phase, who genuinely believed in the version of Blake that she had carefully and consistently presented to the world. Their argument was clear and they made it loudly. Blake was a powerful woman in Hollywood who dared to assert creative control over a project she was deeply invested in, and the men around her couldn't handle it. Full stop. She's being torn apart for having standards, one fan wrote, and that post got shared over 80,000 times. Hollywood has always punished women who speak up. This is the same story with a different name on it, another commented, and the replies were an avalanche of agreement. But then, and this is where it got really complicated, there was the other side. Because not everyone was buying it. The book community, the book talk world, the Colleen Hoover readers, the people who had an emotional, personal connection to the source material, had already been uneasy. They had already been vocal about their discomfort with the promotional campaign. They had already expressed loudly and repeatedly that something about the way this film was being handled felt wrong. And when the legal filings surfaced, a significant portion of that community felt like they finally had the confirmation they'd been looking for. I said something was off from the beginning, and everyone told me I was being too sensitive. One book talk creator said in a video that amassed 3 million views in 2 days. I'm not celebrating this, but I'm not pretending I didn't see this coming either. And then there was a third group, a group that doesn't get talked about as much, but that actually matters enormously in situations like this. The people who didn't know what to believe. The ones who had genuinely loved Blake, who had followed the story closely, who had read both sides of the legal filings, who had listened to everyone's takes, and who were sitting with this uncomfortable, unsettling feeling of uncertainty. Not anger, not loyalty, just confusion, and a creeping sadness that one of the people they'd admired might not be exactly who they'd thought. I feel like I'm grieving something and I don't even fully understand what, one fan wrote. And that comment, that quietly devastated, completely unpolished comment, got more likes than almost anything else in that thread. Because it was honest. And honest hits differently than loud. Meanwhile, away from the public noise, something else was happening. Sources close to the production, and there were several, speaking to multiple major entertainment outlets simultaneously, which itself told a story about how coordinated the information flow had become, began painting a more detailed picture of what life on the set of It Ends With Us had actually looked like. And what they described was not a happy set. Creative disagreements, they said, had begun early. The question of tone, how dark, how raw, how unflinching the film should be in its portrayal of domestic abuse, was apparently a source of ongoing friction. Baldoni's vision, according to these sources, leaned harder into the weight of the subject matter. Blake's influence, they claimed, pushed in a different direction, towards something more emotionally palatable, more audience-friendly, more marketable. Now, and this is important, so pay attention here, neither of those visions is inherently wrong. Films are collaborative. Creative disagreements happen on every single production in Hollywood. Directors and actors clash all the time, and many of those clashes produce incredible work. That's not the story here. The story here is what allegedly happened after the disagreements. What happened when the collaboration stopped working, and both sides started playing a different kind of game entirely. Because according to the filings, and according to the sources speaking to the press, the conflict didn't stay in the editing room. It didn't stay in closed-door production meetings. It allegedly moved into a space that felt far more calculated, far more deliberate, and far more damaging than a simple creative difference of opinion. It allegedly moved into reputation warfare. The term crisis PR got thrown around a lot during this period. And if you're not familiar with how that world works, let me paint you a picture. When a high-profile scandal is about to break, when both sides of a conflict know that something is coming, that documents are about to be filed, that press inquiries are already landing in publicists' inboxes, the teams involved don't just sit and wait. They prepare. They reach out to journalists they trust. They plant seeds. They frame narratives. They try to make sure that when the story finally breaks, it breaks in a way that positions their client as sympathetically as possible. This is not unique to Blake Lively. This is not unique to Justin Baldoni. This is standard operating procedure in Hollywood PR. It happens constantly on almost every major scandal, and most of the time the public never sees the machinery underneath. But this time the machinery got exposed. And once people started seeing how the sausage was made, once they understood that what they were reading in the press wasn't just journalism, but shaped journalism, journalism with sources and angles and carefully timed releases, the trust factor collapsed on both sides. Nobody looked clean. And that reality was deeply uncomfortable for a fanbase that had spent months trying to decide who the villain was. I came into this ready to pick a side, one popular commentary creator admitted in a video. And now I genuinely don't know. And that's somehow worse. But amid all of this, amid the legal filings and the leaked communications and the PR battles and the fan divisions, there was a human being in the middle of it. A woman who, whatever you believe about the specifics of this conflict, was watching her carefully constructed public life get picked apart in real time. Who was reading the comments. Who was seeing her name trend for reasons that had nothing to do with anything she'd ever wanted to be known for. People close to Blake, speaking carefully off the record, described someone who was struggling. Not in a vague press release kind of way, but genuinely, deeply struggling with the gap between the narrative she'd spent years building and the narrative that was now being written about her by people she'd never met and forces she couldn't control. She's not okay, one source told a major outlet, and she's trying very hard to pretend otherwise. That detail, that one detail, it landed differently than everything else. Because suddenly, beneath all the legal language and the PR strategy and the social media noise, there was just a person who was about to walk into a courtroom that would decide not just a legal outcome, but the entire trajectory of everything she had built. And here's what nobody on the outside fully understood yet. The courtroom wasn't just about the lawsuit. It was about something bigger. Something that Blake's legal team had staked everything on. Something that, if it went her way, could potentially rehabilitate her narrative, reframe the entire conflict, and give her a path back to the public goodwill she had lost. But if it went the other way? If the ruling came down against her? Her team knew what that would mean. The press knew what that would mean. And on some level, on some deeply private gut level, Blake knew what that would mean. Which is exactly why what happened next, when she walked into that courtroom and heard those words from the judge, was so absolutely, completely, utterly devastating. The courtroom moment, the breakdown, the twist nobody saw coming, the explosion that followed, and the question that, once you hear it, you won't be able to stop thinking about. Stay right there. There are moments in life that divide everything into before and after. Before the diagnosis. Before the phone call. Before the door closed and didn't open again. Every person watching this right now has at least one of those moments burned into their memory. A specific second in time where the world as you understood it simply stopped. For Blake Lively, that moment happened inside a courtroom. And for the millions of people who were following this story, refreshing pages, watching live streams, waiting for updates with a kind of anxious energy usually reserved for election nights and championship games, it happened at the exact same time. Simultaneously, collectively, publicly. And that's what made it so different from anything else. So raw, so impossible to look away from. Let me take you into that room. The morning of the ruling, The energy outside the courthouse was unlike anything the photographers and reporters stationed there had experienced in recent memory. And these are people who cover Hollywood legal drama for a living. These are people who were outside the courthouse during some of the most talked-about celebrity cases of the last decade. They know what a normal high-profile case looks like. They know the rhythms, the energy, the particular kind of controlled chaos that surrounds these proceedings. This felt different. The crowd of media personnel was larger than expected. Supporters on both sides had gathered, separated pointedly by a significant stretch of pavement that everyone seemed to understand was better left uncrossed. Signs had been made. Not many, but enough to tell you something about how deeply personal this had become for the people watching from the outside. Blake arrived in a black vehicle. She was dressed carefully, deliberately, almost architecturally carefully, the way you dress when you know every single detail of your appearance is going to be analyzed and dissected and screenshotted and argued about on the internet for weeks. Dark, composed, professional. Her face was unreadable in the photographs. Her posture was straight. She looked, to anyone watching her walk up those courthouse steps, like a woman who had made peace with whatever was about to happen. She looked, in other words, like someone performing composure. And the people who knew her, the people who had been close to this situation from the beginning, would later say that the performance was extraordinary. That right up until the moment it wasn't, she held it completely together. Inside the courtroom, the proceedings were methodical in the way that legal proceedings always are, which is to say that they were agonizingly slow in a way that felt almost cruel given the magnitude of what was being decided. Motions were addressed. Arguments were heard. Both legal teams presented their positions with the kind of polished, measured confidence that expensive lawyers are trained to project regardless of what they actually believe about their case. But underneath the procedural formality, everyone in that room could feel it. The weight of it. Because what was being decided wasn't just a legal question. It was a question about credibility, about narrative, about whether the version of events that Blake's team had spent months carefully constructing would hold up under the scrutiny of a process that doesn't care about public relations, doesn't care about brand image, doesn't care about how many followers you have or how beloved you were in a different chapter of your life. The law is indifferent in a way that fame is not. And for someone whose entire world had been built on the currency of public perception, walking into a space of pure indifference must have felt like stepping onto a different planet entirely. The judge began to speak, and within the first 60 seconds, within literally the first minute of that ruling being delivered, it became clear which way this was going. The language was precise. Legal language always is. But even through the formal phrasing, even through the careful judicial construction of every sentence, the direction was unmistakable. The arguments that Blake's legal team had centered their case around, the arguments they had built their entire strategy upon, the arguments they had presented with such visible confidence in the weeks leading up to this moment, were being dismissed. Not partially, not with caveats or qualifications that might leave room for appeal or reframing. Systematically, one by one, the pillars of her case were addressed and found insufficient. The documentation that her team had argued was definitive was characterized differently by the court. The timeline they had constructed was challenged. The legal framework they had applied to their central claims was found to be misaligned with the actual precedent governing this type of dispute. It was by any objective measure a comprehensive loss. And in the room, you could feel the moment it landed. People in the courtroom, journalists, legal observers, individuals connected to both sides of the case, would later describe what happened next in remarkably similar terms, regardless of which side they were on. Blake's expression, which had remained composed and carefully neutral throughout the proceedings, changed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a collapse in the way that movie courtroom scenes depict collapses. No gasping, no outburst, no moment of theatrical devastation that plays well on camera. It was quieter than that, more human than that, and somehow, because of that, more devastating than that. Her jaw tightened first. Then her eyes, and multiple people in that room independently noted this, which is why it matters. Her eyes filled. Not overflowed. Filled. The way eyes fill when someone is fighting with everything they have, not to let what's happening on the inside become visible on the outside. And then, for just a moment, she lost that fight. One reporter who was present described it simply in their filing. She put her hand over her mouth. Her shoulders dropped, and for about 10 seconds she was just gone. 10 seconds. That's all it was. 10 seconds of a woman breaking apart before she pulled herself back together and remembered where she was and who was watching. But 10 seconds was enough, because someone in that courtroom had a camera. And in 2024, 10 seconds is an eternity. The footage, shaky, brief, shot from an angle that suggested someone had been waiting for exactly this moment, hit social media within hours of the ruling becoming public. And the reaction was unlike anything this story had produced up to that point. And this story had already produced a lot. Within 30 minutes of the clip circulating, Blake Lively was the #1 trending topic on every major platform simultaneously. Not trending in a category, not trending in entertainment, trending everywhere. The kind of trending that happens maybe a handful of times a year, reserved for moments that cut through every demographic, every algorithm, every curated feed. The responses split in a way that was almost perfectly symmetrical, which told its own story about how divided people already were going into this moment. One camp watched those 10 seconds and felt something break open in their chest. "I don't care what side you're on," one commenter wrote, a post that got shared over 200,000 times. "Watching a human being fall apart like that in public is just sad. It's just really, really sad." That sentiment, stripped of judgment, stripped of allegiance, resonated in a way that almost nothing else had throughout this entire saga. But the other camp? They watched the same 10 seconds and felt something very different. "She spent months allegedly orchestrating a smear campaign against someone," one prominent entertainment commentator said in a response video that hit 1 million views before the day was out. "And now that the court has seen through it, we're supposed to feel sorry for the breakdown? I'm sorry. I can't get there." The internet didn't just take sides. The internet dug in, entrenched itself, built walls, and the noise became almost impossible to navigate. But here's where the story takes a turn that nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. Because while the internet was consuming the footage of Blake's breakdown, while the commentary videos were being filmed and the think pieces were being written, and the fan communities were fracturing along their established fault lines, something else was happening. Something that, when it became public, didn't just add another layer to this story. It reframed everything. A second set of documents that had not been part of the original legal filing, documents that Blake's team had been fighting to keep sealed, were ordered released by the court as part of the ruling. And what those documents contained stopped the internet cold. Not because they definitively proved one side right and the other wrong. Not because they were the smoking gun that everyone had been waiting for. But because they revealed something about the origin of this conflict that neither side had been fully honest about publicly. They revealed that the tension between Blake and Baldoni hadn't started during production, as both sides had implied through their respective narratives. It had started before filming even began. Communications contained in those released documents showed that concerns, significant, documented, formally raised concerns, about creative control, about the handling of the film's sensitive subject matter, and about the professional dynamic on set had been flagged by multiple parties before a single frame was shot. Not after, before, which meant that the narrative both sides had been selling, the idea that this was a conflict that emerged organically from the pressure of production, from creative differences that couldn't be resolved in the editing room, from a collaboration that tried and failed, was at minimum incomplete. At maximum, it was something closer to deliberately constructed. And when that realization hit the people who had been following this story most closely, the reaction wasn't the explosive partisan fury that had characterized every previous development. It was something quieter, something heavier. Betrayal. Not Team Blake's betrayal of Team Baldoni, or the other way around, but the betrayal that both sides of the public conversation suddenly felt. The realization that they had been, to varying degrees, managed. That the story they'd been consuming and debating and taking sides on had been carefully curated from the very beginning by people with very specific interests in how it was perceived. "I feel like I've been watching a movie about a movie," one person wrote. And neither version of the movie was real. That comment got pinned to the top of one of the largest celebrity drama subreddits for 3 days. Because it said in 14 words, what 1 million think pieces couldn't. Meanwhile, back in that courtroom, after the ruling had been fully delivered and the session had formally ended, Blake Lively sat for a long moment before she stood. Those who were watching described it as the most human thing they'd seen throughout this entire proceeding. The lawyers were already moving, already talking, already pivoting into whatever came next. The machinery of the legal process was already reorganizing itself around the outcome. But Blake just sat for a moment that one observer described as lasting probably only 15 seconds but feeling much longer. she sat completely still in that courtroom. Not performing stillness. Not constructing composure for the cameras. Just sitting, present with whatever was happening inside of her in a way that all the preparation and PR strategy and carefully chosen outfits in the world couldn't touch. And then she stood up, straightened her jacket, and walked out. Head up, steps measured, face reorganized into something approaching neutral. But the footage already existed. The documents were already public. The twist was already out there, spreading through every corner of the internet at the speed that only genuinely seismic stories travel. And the question that was now on absolutely everyone's lips, the question that even the people who had defended her most fiercely were now quietly asking themselves, had fundamentally changed. It was no longer, will Blake survive this? It was something far more complicated, far more uncomfortable, far more interesting. What happens when the story you told about yourself stops being the story anyone believes? Part 4 is where we find out. The aftermath. The silence. What Blake does next. And the question that might define the rest of her career. Don't you dare go anywhere. Silence. That's what came first. Not the loud, chaotic, internet-breaking silence that we throw that word around to describe when we really just mean noise. Not the trending silence. Not the performative silence of a carefully timed social media break designed to generate sympathy and speculation in equal measure. Real silence. The kind that descends after something genuinely significant has happened and the world, even the part of the world that runs entirely on content and clicks and the endless churn of the next story, doesn't quite know what to do with itself yet. For 48 hours after that courtroom ruling, Blake lively posted nothing. Said nothing. Released nothing through her representatives beyond a single, brief, carefully worded statement that acknowledged the ruling, expressed her continued commitment to her position, and said, in the diplomatic language that lawyers craft specifically to communicate without actually communicating, essentially nothing of substance. And in the vacuum that silence created, the internet did what the internet always does. It filled the space with everything it had. The think pieces arrived first. They always do. Major publications that had been covering this story from the beginning now had the outcome they needed to write the definitive piece. The analytical, contextualizing, here's what this all means article that attempts to place a cultural moment inside a larger frame. And those pieces came from every conceivable angle. Some positioned Blake's courtroom loss as part of a broader conversation about power in Hollywood. About who gets to control their narrative and who doesn't. About the specific and complicated way that powerful women are treated when they assert creative authority in an industry that was built by and for men. Those pieces were thoughtful. Some of them were genuinely excellent. They asked real questions about real systemic problems and used this specific case as an entry point into a conversation that deserved to be had regardless of the individual details. Others took the opposite position entirely, framing the outcome as accountability, as a necessary correction, as evidence that the machinery of reputation management has limits and that those limits matter. That no amount of strategic PR can indefinitely outrun documented reality. That eventually, in one arena or another, the truth finds its level. And then there were the pieces that did something braver and more uncomfortable than either of those approaches. They sat with the ambiguity. They acknowledged that this story, like most real stories about real people in real situations with real stakes, didn't resolve into a clean moral. That the courtroom loss didn't make Blake Lively a villain any more than her tears made her a victim. That the twist of the pre-production documents didn't exonerate Baldoni any more than it condemned Blake. That the whole messy, complicated, deeply human wreckage of this situation resisted the kind of binary storytelling that social media demands, and that audiences, understandably, find satisfying. Those pieces were the hardest to read, because hard truths usually are. On day 3 of the silence, something unexpected happened. A letter appeared, not a press release, not an official statement routed through publicists and approved by legal teams. A letter, handwritten, photographed, posted directly to Blake's personal social media without announcement or context, addressed simply to everyone who's been watching. And the internet, which had been running at full volume for weeks, went very, very quiet. The letter didn't relitigate the legal arguments. It didn't attack anyone. It didn't perform remorse or strategically position her as a reformed figure ready for a comeback arc. It was, by the standards of celebrity public communication, remarkably unpolished. Remarkably human. She wrote about what it felt like to sit in that courtroom. Not what she thought about the ruling, what it felt like. She wrote about the gap between the person she believed herself to be and the person that had been described in the legal filings and the press coverage and the comment sections and the viral clips. She wrote about her children, obliquely, protectively, without specifics, and about the particular terror of having your worst moments become public property, while the people you love most watch from the sidelines and can't do anything to help you. She wrote, and this was the line that stopped everyone, the line that got screenshotted 10,000 times in the first hour. I don't know how to be someone who lost in public. I've never learned how to do that. I'm trying to figure it out in real time, and I know that's not clean or comfortable to watch. The reaction to that letter was the most genuinely divided response of this entire saga, because it cracked something open in the public conversation that the legal drama, ironically, hadn't managed to crack. It reintroduced the human being, and people, even people who had been loudly and firmly on the other side of this story, even people who had spent weeks constructing arguments about accountability and narrative manipulation and the ethics of reputation management, found themselves pausing, reconsidering, not necessarily changing their position on the facts of the case, but recalibrating something in the way they were holding the story. "I've been so angry at her for months," one commenter wrote, and this was someone who had been vocal, consistently vocal, in their criticism throughout the entire saga. And reading this letter, I'm still not sure I was wrong to be angry. But I feel something else now. I don't know what to call it. I just feel something else. That comment got over 300,000 likes. 300,000 people pressing a button that said, yes, me too. I also feel something I don't have a clean word for. And that, more than any legal ruling, more than any leaked document, more than any viral clip of a 10-second breakdown in a courthouse, that told you something real about where the public was actually landing on this. Not with verdicts, not with certainty, with complexity, with exhaustion, with something that looked quietly and uncomfortably like empathy extended in multiple directions at once. So where does Blake Lively go from here? That's the question that everyone is asking. That's the question that her team is asking. That's the question that the industry, which has a very specific and not always compassionate way of calculating these things, is already in the process of answering whether she's ready for them to or not. Hollywood has a complicated relationship with public failure. On one hand, it loves a redemption arc. The industry that produced the concept of the comeback is genuinely, structurally invested in the idea that people can fall and fall again and rise again, because that narrative is itself commercially valuable. Audiences are drawn to it. Studios can build campaigns around it. There's money in the resurrection story. But Hollywood also has a memory, and it has standards, inconsistent, often hypocritical, deeply influenced by power and access and who your friends are, but standards nonetheless. And those standards have a particular way of applying themselves to women in ways that they simply don't apply to men. The path back from a public fall is longer and narrower for a woman in this industry. The margin for error is smaller. The period of penance is longer. The conditions attached to the redemption are more numerous and more demanding. Blake knows this. Anyone who has spent 20 years building a career in this industry knows this. Which means the choices she makes in the coming weeks and months aren't just personal decisions. They're strategic ones. Every appearance, every project, every interview, every social media post, every silence, and every statement. All of it is now operating under a level of scrutiny that even the most media-trained, image-conscious celebrity would find genuinely challenging to navigate. The people closest to her, speaking carefully, as they have throughout this entire saga, describe someone who is genuinely reassessing. Not just tactically, not just in terms of what moves to make next on a PR chessboard, but fundamentally, at the level of values and priorities, and the question of what actually matters when everything that felt stable has been shaken. She's doing a lot of thinking, one source told a major entertainment outlet. Real thinking, not the kind you do for a press tour. The kind you do at 3 in the morning when there's nobody to perform for. Ryan Reynolds, who had been notably, almost pointedly absent from the public conversation throughout the bulk of this saga, was reported to be a constant, grounding presence. Whether that private support would eventually translate into a public show of solidarity, and what form that might take, became its own sub-narrative in the weeks following the ruling. Because the internet, as we have thoroughly established, leaves no stone unturned. Some fans found Reynolds' public silence supportive. A man choosing to protect his family's privacy in a genuinely painful moment rather than weaponizing his own celebrity on her behalf. Others read it differently. as distance, as careful positioning, as the move of someone ensuring that the fallout from his wife's legal loss didn't contaminate his own carefully maintained public image. "They're America's couple until it's inconvenient," one commentator said sharply. "Then suddenly he's got nothing to say?" It was an unfair characterization, probably. But it landed. Because in the absence of information, people project. And in the absence of Ryan Reynolds saying anything, people projected everything. And then there's the longer question. The question that sits underneath all the legal analysis and the PR strategy and the fan divisions and the think pieces and the viral moments. The question about what this whole chapter means. Because here's what I keep coming back to. Here's what I can't shake, no matter how many angles I look at this story from. Blake Lively built something genuinely remarkable. Not just a career, a brand, a presence, a public identity that millions of people felt connected to in a way that went beyond celebrity parasocial attachment. People felt like they knew her. Felt like she was the brilliant, funny, gorgeous friend who also happened to be famous. That feeling, that specific illusion of authentic connection, is the hardest thing in the world to manufacture and the hardest thing in the world to repair once it's been broken. And that's what this courtroom loss really destroyed. Not her legal position, not her financial standing, not even necessarily her career in any permanent or irreversible way. It destroyed the illusion. It took the version of Blake Lively that existed in the public imagination, the effortlessly charming, always in control, fundamentally likable woman who made everything look easy, and it replaced her, at least for now, with something more complicated, more fallible, more real. And the question, the genuine, unanswerable, endlessly fascinating question, is whether real is something the public can ultimately love just as much. History suggests it's possible. History is full of public figures who fell further than Blake Lively has fallen, who lost more than she has lost, who faced a harsher and less forgiving public than the one she's dealing with now, and who found their way back. Not back to exactly what they were before. You can't go back to exactly what you were before. The fall changes the shape of things permanently, but back to something, back to work that matters, back to a version of public life that has been recalibrated to account for what they now know about themselves and about the world, and about the gap between who we perform ourselves to be and who we actually are when the performance falls away. That path exists, whether Blake Lively has the willingness to walk it honestly, not strategically, not with an eye on the next brand deal or the next press cycle, but honestly, is the only question that actually matters now. And none of us from the outside can answer it for her. So let me bring it back to you, because that's why you're here, right? Not just to watch this story unfold, but to think about it, to feel something about it, to bring your own experience and your own judgment to a situation that resists easy conclusions. Here's what I want to know from you. Do you believe in second chances for public figures? And I mean genuinely, not the theoretical, abstract kind of second chance that's easy to believe in when it's someone you've never cared about. I mean the messy, complicated, ongoing kind of second chance that requires you to hold someone's failures and their humanity at the same time without resolving the tension between them. Can you do that with Blake Lively? Leave your answer in the comments. And I don't want a simple yes or no. I want to know why. I want to know what part of this story hit you hardest. I want to know if you changed your mind at any point while watching this video, and what made you change it. Those conversations, the real ones, the ones where people actually think instead of just react, are why this channel exists. If this video made you think, if it made you feel something complicated and true, hit that like button. Not because the algorithm demands it, though it does, but because it tells me that this kind of storytelling is worth continuing. That you want more than hot takes and surface-level drama. That you want the full story, told with the care and the depth and the emotional honesty that these very human situations deserve. Subscribe if you're new here. And turn on notifications, because this story is not over. Not even close. The next chapter is already forming. And when it breaks, we are going to be ready. Blake Lively walked into that courtroom as one of Hollywood's most recognizable, most carefully constructed public personas. She walked out as something more complicated, more broken maybe, but also possibly, just possibly more real. And real, in the end, is the only thing that lasts.